When you think of migration, you might think of this. But it can also look like this, and this, and this. Migration is a broad term for a complex issue. And while refugees and asylum seekers make up a significant portion of migrants, 2/3 are actually labor migrants. There are many more misconceptions about migration. We are busting 5 of the most common myths. Here's number 1. Stricter migration policy means less migration. Walls, fences, border controls, they're all designed to stop illegal migration. But they don't tackle its root causes, like conflict, poverty, and climate change.
They also force migrants, to embark on perilous and dangerous routes that put at heavy risk their lives and their rights, as well as their futures.
There's also evidence that introducing restrictions can lead to a short-term surge as people try to get in before they're shut out. And when it's harder for labor migrants to come and go, they're more likely to stay permanently in the country they've traveled through. More liberal policies can encourage circular migration. For example, seasonal workers migrating just for the time they're needed. Myth number 2. Once a country's economy develops, fewer people will leave. Makes sense, right? Why would you leave the moment things are starting to look up? But here's the thing. We actually see that when a country's economy starts to develop, that's when people start to leave. That's because immigration is quite an expensive undertaking. In poorer countries, people can't afford to leave. But in emerging economies, such as Mexico, Turkey or India, more people have the resources to go and legally pursue a life abroad. But it's far more than that. As a country's economy grows, so do its citizens' aspirations.
Sometimes migrants are not only driven by rational calculations, but they would like perhaps to diversify their life's trajectory. They would like to seek for new opportunities of self-fulfillment and growth.
But this only applies to a certain point. Once development goes further and people can find what they are looking for at home, fewer people tend to leave. Myth number 3. Origin countries are the losers of migration. When people leave a country, they take their education, skills and earning potential with them. So, don't their home countries lose out?
Migration is also not a curse. Migration is never the major reason countries don't develop. It's one of many factors.
Labor migrants often come from countries with big populations and fewer jobs and resources to go around. Immigration can take some of the pressure off the labor market and boost employment rates.
Migration itself can actually help a country develop because people earn money, send it back, and after they've earned enough money, they come back themselves.
These so-called remittance payments can be hugely important. Although they do not lead to economic development by themselves, they help out individual families and communities, and sometimes even economies as a whole. In Tajikistan, for example, remittances made up almost 1/3 of GDP in 2022. In Tonga, the share was even higher, half of GDP. But it's again not only about the money.
When migrants circulate, when people are on the move, they diffuse new ideas, new ways of being at the cultural, political, and social levels, and not only, through sending remittances back home.
In many cases, the mere prospect of migration boosts education and training in origin countries. Myth number 4. Migration harms the economy. Studies show that in advanced economies, generally the countries receiving migrants, migration generally improves productivity and economic growth.
These countries are successful not because of migration. They are successful because they have the rule of law and they have institutions and good educational infrastructures. But without migration, they would not be as successful as they are. So migration is a major factor that contributes to their success.
And rather than being a burden on welfare systems in these countries, immigrants pay more in taxes and social contributions than they get back in individual benefits. But there are challenges. Firstly, to create these economic benefits, migrants need to have a chance to work. And there is a risk of low-skilled immigration driving down wages, creating even more inequality. Myth number 5. Migration can fix the aging population problem. Many Western countries have aging populations, which means shrinking workforces. They need immigration to help fill the gap in the labor force. But while migration helps, it can't fix that problem alone. Usually, aging population trends are just too strong to be reversed by immigration. Let's take Europe as an example. A 2019 study for the European Commission found that even doubling immigration to Europe wouldn't decisively change the pace of population aging. What's much more effective? Making sure we make the most of immigration.
Migration that leads to people arriving in a country, let's say Germany, and then not having a status for years, being unclear whether they can stay, not having the certainty that if they work or learn the language, they will actually be able to stay. Because in the end, German institutions might decide that they have arrived irregularly and need to be deported. That is not good for integration and success.
Canada, on the other hand, is a good example of how it's done. The country sees great potential in immigrants and plans on bringing in more. From the very beginning, immigrants are given a clear roadmap of when, how, and why they can enter, and what they can expect. So, what can we learn from all of this? There will always be migration. It's part of the human condition. Always has been, always will be. Therefore, it makes sense to have migration policy that is attuned to human needs. Governments could, for example, outline ways to migrate safely and legally. Both origin and destination countries can benefit from migration if it's well done. Migration can be an opportunity for societal and economic growth. But it's not a monologue, rather a dialogue. Everyone affected needs to have a seat at the discussion table. And immigrants need a clear outlook, an incentive for integration. We need more evidence-based discussion on migration. Because, honestly, there's still a lot more myth out there.